We live in a world that values appearances more than substance. I know, it sounds like a cliché, but let's be honest. In practice, it happens far more often than we'd like to admit. Maybe you've experienced it yourself. You walked into a new place and instantly felt the stares, judging your clothes, your way of speaking, or even the badge around your neck. Or maybe, without realizing it, you've done the same to someone else, judging by their cover, their job, their worn-out uniform. The truth is, at some point, we all fall into this cruel trap of superficiality, but some historians have the power to shake us awake. And this is exactly the kind of story you're about to hear. What if I told you that a woman, dismissed as insignificant just because she cleaned offices, ended up teaching such a powerful lesson that it completely overturned the beliefs of a group of arrogant lawyers? Sounds unlikely, right? But get ready because it happened. Yes, in the real world. In one of those offices where people wear expensive suits, speak in complicated terms, and often forget that intelligence has nothing to do with luxury brands. There, a cleaning lady constantly mocked in whispers was known as the invisible woman with a broom. And what no one knew, or even suspected, was that the very person they overlooked possessed a brilliance that could make any so-called expert feel ashamed. In less than 24 hours, that same woman went from being the target of laughter to a respected voice of wisdom, from ignored in the hallways to the center of attention on an unexpected stage, receiving sincere applause from those who once mocked her. And she did it without raising her voice, without fighting, without demanding respect through force. She relied only on her truth, her knowledge, her humanity, and a quiet courage most people don't have. So now I ask you, how many times have we judged others based on appearance and missed the chance to learn from extraordinary people? How many times could we have been better professionals and better human beings, if only we had taken a moment to listen? If you've ever felt underestimated, this story will show you how to rise with dignity. And if you realize that, maybe, just maybe, you've unfairly judged someone before, then this is exactly the story you need to make sure it never happens again. Because today, you'll understand that true value isn't found in fancy clothes or rehearsed confidence. True value, the kind no one can take away, comes from the inside out, and sooner or later, it always shines through. Are you ready to dive into a historia that's as thought-provoking as it is moving? Clara walked through the office halls like she was part of the furniture, always there, always useful, but rarely seen. At the law firm where she had worked for 5 years, few knew her full name, and if they did, they pretended not to. The sound of her broom echoed between the fake smiles of people who thought they were too important to return a simple good morning. It was as if she wore a cloak of invisibility, not by choice, but because society insists on erasing those who don't fit the mold of visible prestige. One day during lunch, Clara heard something she'd never forget. The invisible woman with the broom is always nearby, followed by muffled laughter. It wasn't the first time. The interns, young, dressed in name-brand clothing, and carrying the arrogance of those who think they know it, all loved making jokes. They mocked her rural accent, her simple words, her worn sandals. One even mimicked the way she talked in front of others, making everyone laugh like it was the main act of a comedy show. Clara never responded aggressively, but her eyes said everything. Those who truly see people can recognize the pain in someone who's been wounded many times. And the saddest part, many of those young interns were there to defend justice. Yet they hadn't learned the most basic lesson: respect for others. Unfortunately, Clara's story isn't unique. These historias happen in banks, stores, hospitals, companies. People being judged by their clothes, their tone of voice, or the school they attended or didn't even get the chance to attend. If you think this is an exaggeration, pay close attention to how people treat the one serving coffee in a meeting, or the one cleaning a room after an important event. The contrast in behavior is staggering. Clara was a victim of a silent culture of contempt, rooted in egos disguised as meritocracy. But without realizing it, those interns were about to become supporting characters in one of life's classic plot twists. And when the tables turn, Oh, trust me, no one walks away untouched. Clara never fit the stereotype the office admired, but if you looked closely, you'd see in her eyes the glow of someone who once dreamed big, and it wasn't just any dream. Clara had studied law for 3 years at a public university, riding crowded buses, enduring demanding professors, and staying up all night preparing for exams and assignments. She was good, really good. She joined study groups, participated in academic debates, and was once praised by a judge during a field visit. But then life struck. Her elderly mother had a stroke. Overnight, Clara became a nurse, caregiver, cook, and the household's pillar, and her dream had to wait. What's impressive is that she never complained, never played the victim. While cleaning other people's offices, Clara continued studying on her own. She'd often be seen wearing headphones, listening to audiobooks on constitutional law while scrubbing the floors. At home, she kept a carefully organized stack of books, ranging from classics like On Crimes and Punishments by Beccaria to contemporary works like The People vs. Democracy. Once, she found a forgotten intern's study guide in the bathroom and read it all that same night. She highlighted passages, wrote comments in the margins. While others saw only a cleaning lady, she was actually a silent legal scholar in the making. And here's the irony. Many in that office thought they were scholars just because they carried designer bags and the latest laptops. But expensive tools mean nothing if your purpose is hollow. Clara had something rare. She understood the why of justice, not just the how, and that changes everything. Her motivation wasn't status, it was compassion. And these are the historias that teach the most, the ones born out of sacrifice, but rooted in purpose. The stage hadn't been set yet, but the backstage was already buzzing. All it would take was the right opportunity to transform that cleaning lady into something no one expected, a specialist. It was a regular Tuesday until an email from upper management arrived with the subject: mandatory participation, legal simulation with guest NGO. At first, many rolled their eyes. Some interns thought it would be just another boring exercise, something to earn a certificate, and nothing more. But they were wrong. The NGO was well known. It worked in vulnerable communities, mediating conflicts, preventing lawsuits, restoring a sense of justice where the state had failed. The meeting room was turned into a mock courtroom. Lights, cameras, brochures at the reception. Everything was flawless, but nothing compared to the moment the door opened and Clara walked in. She was unrecognizable. Her hair was elegantly tied back, a navy blue blazer tailored perfectly to her body, her gaze calm and steady, like someone who knew exactly where she stood. She was welcomed by the NGO coordinator with a warm hug, and then introduced as a community mediation specialist. With over 15 successful out-of-court resolutions, the audience froze. It was the same Clara who, just days ago, had been cleaning the corners of that office floor. One of the interns, stunned, dropped his phone. Another whispered, "This can't be real." But it was. Clara stepped up to the podium, as if that space had always belonged to her. And then she began. She explained the pillars of mediation, with a clarity that even the most experienced lawyers couldn't match. She gave real-life examples of conflicts resolved through dialogue, like to neighbors who had been fighting for years over a wall and, with her help, ended up attending each other's grandchildren's birthday parties. She cited jurisprudence, technically grounded her statements, and with humility, demonstrated complete mastery of the subject. The highlight, when she respectfully corrected a conceptual error made by a senior lawyer, in front of everyone. The looks of mockery had turned into admiration, and the histories Clara carried silent and underestimated were finally being heard. That meeting room, usually accustomed to technical speeches and pompous jargon, was now breathing a different kind of authority, the kind that comes from lived knowledge. Clara, with a serene posture and a confident gaze, continued her presentation as if she were at home, and in a way, she was. After all, it was in that very room she had spent years overhearing conversations, while wiping tables, sweeping up crumbs of vanity, and collecting the leftovers of meetings. Now, all eyes were on her. When the NGO director opened the floor for questions, hands began to rise timidly. Renowned lawyers wanted to hear Clara. They wanted to ask. They wanted to learn. It was a symbolic and powerful turning point, and it didn't need a soundtrack to be cinematic. As she answered, Clara demonstrated a technical command that only those who truly live what they teach can possess. She didn't repeat memorized phrases from textbooks. She spoke with depth, clarity, and above all, purpose. She explained how active listening transforms family conflicts that have lasted decades. She shared real statistics and results, showing how entire communities had been impacted by mediation practices. And when one of the directors questioned the practical validity of a model she cited from a particular community, Clara elegantly countered with case resolution data and reduced litigation rates. It was then that the firm's most experienced lawyer, the same one who used to ignore her in the hallways, leaned over to a colleague and whispered, "That woman knows what she's talking about." But the most symbolic moment came when an intern, nervous, tried to offer a legal analysis and got it wrong. In any other context, his mistake might have become a joke among his peers. But Clara, with the same calm she had when cleaning windows after hours, smiled and said, "That's an interesting point you brought up, but it's worth reviewing Article 28 of the Mediation Act. It addresses exactly the exception you mentioned," and she explained clearly, firmly, and respectfully. The young man, instead of feeling embarrassed, thanked her, and the others applauded. It wasn't just a correction, it was a lesson in empathy and leadership, and these are the historias that should be told in law school classes, HR seminars, and roundtable talks about what it means to be a true professional. But this was still only the beginning. What followed Clara's presentation wasn't just silence. It was a dense stillness, an internal echo in everyone present, the kind of silence that weighs heavier than 1,000 spoken words. Some tried to force smiles, others shuffled the papers in front of them just to keep their hands busy, but a collective feeling lingered in the air. Shame. Shame for having judged. Shame for having mocked. Shame for having ignored a woman who, just yesterday, was treated as part of the scenery. The interns, once full of self-confidence, now avoided even looking at each other. No one quite knew what to do with this new truth. Clara was, in fact, the most prepared person in that room to speak about empathy, justice, and social transformation. One of them, the most talkative of the group, sat with arms crossed and teary eyes. He didn't cry, not yet, but seemed to be wrestling internally with something no college ever teaches: the ability to admit arrogance. He remembered the jokes, the times he passed her in the hallway and didn't even return her good morning. And now, right there, he wished he could go back in time and do it all differently. And he wasn't alone. Most of them felt the same. It's curious how the sting of conscience hits harder when the truth is delivered gently. Clara didn't give aggressive speeches, didn't demand anything, but her presence was a mere end. It reflected what many had been avoiding in themselves. That's when the firm's leadership decided to act. Immediately, they launched an internal development program focused on diversity, empathy, and inclusion, and invited Clara to lead the sessions. When they announced the initiative, she listened attentively, took a deep breath, then said, "I accept, but on one condition: this must not be a symbolic action. It's not about revenge, it's about awareness. The world needs more listening than judgment." The room fell silent. It was as if every word she spoke carried a specific, precise weight, reaching deep into the soul of those who heard it. Some lowered their heads. Others looked at her with misty eyes. And so, without raising her voice, without pointing fingers, Clara changed not just a room, but the mindset of those who thought they already knew everything. And the most powerful part, that wasn't even the biggest turning point in her story. The scene was quiet, yet carried overwhelming symbolism. For the first time, Clara entered that same meeting room as someone invited to teach, not to clean. The space where she once served as background now became the center of her stage. But the most impressive shift was invisible. The people were different. The circle of chairs, without a central table, already signaled something outside the corporate norm. The interns, who once pretended to study spreadsheets to avoid looking at the cleaner, now straightened their notebooks, their gaze, even their posture. They were ready, but not to hear prepackaged motivational phrases. They were ready to listen to a truth few have the courage to speak. Clara didn't use slides. She didn't need them. Instead of formulas, she offered real-life stories. She spoke of being called to mediate a conflict between two brothers who hadn't spoken in 8 years, and how a guided conversation turned bitter silence into a heartfelt hug. She described the tension of entering a house where neighbors were on the brink of violence over a gate, and leaving with a community garden growing on the land that once divided them. As she spoke, she didn't just deliver technical content, she delivered raw humanity, wrapped in lived experiences. Each sentence was an invitation to self-awareness, and the most moving part, she did it all with serenity, no resentment, no need to prove anything to anyone. That was greatness. Then came the moment no one would forget. One intern, the one who had mocked Clara the most in the past, raised his hand, eyes red and voice trembling. "Mrs. Clara, how did you manage to stay kind to us, even after everything we did?" The room froze. Clara took a deep breath, smiled, and responded with something that could easily be written on the entrance of any company. "That truly wants to improve, because I knew you were still learning. And those who have been hurt by life learn to be patient with those who haven't yet understood the value of dignity." Silence, teary eyes, applause, long-standing. The symbolic shift had happened, and it wasn't just hers. It belonged to everyone, because it's these historias lived with silent courage that have the power to unlock both minds and hearts. The change began slowly, almost imperceptibly, like all things that are real. At first it was small gestures, a more genuine good morning, a please that used to be absent. The interns, who once pretended Clara didn't exist, now waited for her at the coffee machine to ask about active listening techniques. One even said, "Do you think I have what it takes to mediate conflicts, Mrs. Clara?" And she, with that gaze that seemed to see beyond, replied, "Anyone does. The secret is listening more to understand and less to respond." That phrase even became a note pinned on the firm's message board. The cleaner, who was once invisible, was now a source of daily wisdom. And without realizing it, the young lawyers were becoming more human and less arrogant. But the change wasn't just felt in the hallways. In the firm's legal work, attitudes also began to reflect something new. One intern who used to mock Clara now reviewed his briefs more carefully, aiming not just to understand the letter of the law, but the spirit behind it. Another, who once treated admin staff with disdain, now greeted everyone by name, including the security guards and kitchen workers. The firm's leadership itself began to question the structures they had built, and realized that what Clara brought wasn't just emotional impact, it was cultural disruption. Clara had shown, through her posture, that respect is not demanded by shouting. It's earned in the quiet power of example. And the most inspiring part was how she handled that change, with the natural grace of someone who never wanted applause, only space. She listened more than she spoke, gave advice with gentleness, and taught through questions, rather than ready-made answers. One day, a newly hired lawyer, who didn't know who she was yet, asked her automatically, "Ma'am, do you know where the cleaning supplies are kept?" Before Clara could say a word, another intern answered, "That's Clara. She cleans our vision of what it means to be truly great." She laughed, thanked him, and continued on with the same humility as always. Because the best historias are those where the main character changes the world, without ever changing their essence. And at that point in her journey, life was preparing a new, even more transformative chapter. The invitation came like a whisper of destiny. One of those moments you almost don't believe when you hear it for the first time. Clara was called to the director's office on an ordinary afternoon, the kind where the sky itself seems to signal change. When she entered, she noticed the calmer atmosphere, a freshly brewed coffee on the table, and a dark leather folder on the wooden desk. She sat down. The director, the very one who had once ignored her in the hallways, looked her in the eyes, this time with true respect, and said, "You've taught us more than any consultancy ever has. It's time we returned the favor. Inside the folder was a formal letter offering her a full scholarship to resume her law degree, and more, an official internship in the firm's mediation department, with a clear growth plan. It wasn't charity. It was poetic justice. That night, Clara couldn't sleep. She held the letter like someone holding a ticket to rewrite their own historia. She remembered the day she walked away from college with an empty folder and a heart full of guilt, having given it all up to take care of her mother. She remembered the nights studying in secret in the bathroom while cleaning offices during evening classes. Now, decades later, the cycle was complete. On her first day back at university, she carried the same folder from her student days, but something was different. Inside it, along with books, was the light weight of a clean conscience and the life experience of someone who never gave up, only waited for the right time. As she walked through the university halls, no one imagined that this elegant, calm woman was actually one of the sharpest minds in the class. At the firm, her new role started off quietly, but quickly became essential. Clara took part in mediation sessions, analyzed reports on complex disputes, and helped create internal listening and inclusion policies. Clients, impressed by her clarity and presence, began requesting her in meetings. She was invited to external events, training programs, even legal podcasts focused on restorative justice. And through it all, Clara remained the same, kind, observant, humble. She still took public transportation, drank the same simple coffee in the break room, and made a point of asking every janitor's name. Her greatness was silent, but impossible to ignore, because it's these historias, born in humility and blooming in respect, that don't just inspire changes in behavior, but changes in culture. Clara never sought applause, for her transformation was a quiet verb. That's why, even after months passed and the office returned to its usual rhythm, she remained steady and unchanged. She still rode the bus, greeted everyone with her shy smile, and carried her blue folder, now filled with mediation reports, academic articles, and invitations to events she never imagined she'd receive. Still, she never stopped paying attention to the small things, like asking the kitchen assistant how her sick mother was doing or writing down a new intern's name just to remember it later. What Clara didn't know was that her name was now spoken with admiration in places where she had once gone unnoticed. But her true legacy came to light in the most unexpected way. It was the law school graduation of one of the firm's interns, a young man known for his arrogance, who often laughed loudly at others, especially at her. No one expected much from his speech, but when he stepped onto the stage, graduation robe on his shoulders and microphone in hand, he paused. He looked out into the crowd and said, "Today, everyone will talk about professors, doctrine, and case law. But the person who taught me the most about justice, respect, and what it means to be human was Clara. Yes, the same Clara who used to mop the floors while I studied. And yet, she's the wisest woman I've ever known." The audience froze, and then erupted into applause, the most sincere of the entire evening. Clara sat at the back, as always, discreet, elegant. She tried to hold back the tears, but couldn't, and that was okay, because those tears were more than just emotion. They were the release of a lifetime spent invisible, until her light became impossible to ignore. After that night, her historia became a reference. The firm named their scholarship program after her. Universities invited her to lecture on community mediation, but more than anything, she became a symbol of transformation, dignity, and quiet power. The greatest lesson of all, that the most impactful historias aren't told by those who shout, but by those who remain firm, even when the world tries to silence them. And Clara became eternal, not because of status, but because of legacy. A legacy that continues to grow in every gaze that chooses to truly see. Now tell me, honestly, how many people have you seen being treated as invisible? Or worse, how many times might you have done it without realizing? Maybe it was the doorman, the cleaning lady at school, the rideshare driver, those who are always around, but rarely heard. Clara represents all those silent voices that, when lifted with wisdom, shake the very foundations of arrogance. And maybe that's why this Historia moved you so much, because deep down, we've all been Clara, or crossed paths with one. So here's the question. What now? Will you keep acting like nothing happened? Will you click away from this video and go back to judging people by their clothes, their accent, or their name tag? Or will you start practicing what you've just learned in the simple act of treating everyone with dignity, no matter their role, their outfit, or their shoes? Because look, if a Historia like this doesn't make you rethink something, then you've missed a powerful chance to become a better version of yourself. This isn't about being nice. It's about being aware. And more than that, it's about being just. So tell me in the comments, have you ever been judged by your appearance? Have you ever felt invisible in a place where only your title or clothes seemed to matter? Or maybe you've made the mistake of underestimating someone and regretted it? Feel free to open your heart. No one here is judging. We're here to grow together. And if this video made sense to you, if this Historia touched you and made you reflect, don't keep it to yourself. Subscribe to the channel, turn on notifications so you don't miss the next Historia, and share this with someone who needs to hear it. Because when we change the way we see others, the world changes with us. And sometimes, it all starts with simply listening.